We're about 1 week out from YCS Bologna taking place, as well as the release of easily the best structure deck in quite some time. A lot of people are excited for both, but on the other hand, there's a good deal of people in the Yu-Gi-Oh community that haven't looked too deeply into it and are wondering just how good the new Fire King support actually is. Is it something that's actually going to affect the meta in a noticeable way, or just all hype and something that people are going to play for a week and then fall off a cliff? Luckily for those people, I've actually done almost all the legwork for you, and this video is going to serve as a guide for everything Fire Kings. In this video, I'll explain the new support, how it works, how the deck operates, what to watch out for if you choose to play Fire Kings, and then lastly, how some of the common meta matchups are likely to go for you. Most already know this, but for anyone else, here's a quick refresher. Fire Kings are a fire-based archetype that primarily consists of winged beast and beast warrior monsters whose effects revolve around destroying themselves or other Fire King cards to trigger advantage creating effects. These effects can range from ones that let you search other cards in the archetype during the next standby phase, to reborning themselves, then nuking all other monsters on the field, or even a monster reborn effect for any fire, beast, beast warrior, or winged beast monster in your graveyard. It was a really cool concept, and with the help of their other support cards, mainly the spells, like Fire King Island and Onslaught of the Fire Kings, the deck saw mild success in the TCG as a pure deck and also when combined with Cosmos and Dragonic Diagram. Now the main issue for Fire Kings were 1, the deck was incredibly clunky and inconsistent if you didn't have access to Fire King Island, and 2, there just weren't enough extenders. And even the extenders that the deck did have access to, like Onslaught and Circle, they had pretty specific conditions tied to them, like your opponent needing to have a monster on field to activate Onslaught, or you needing to have a fire in the graveyard to use Circle. Enter Structure Deck Fire King 2023, which I can sincerely say addresses both of these problems. This structure deck introduces about 8 new cards, but only 6 of them are likely to see competitive play, so I'll be focusing on those in the video. Let's start with the new boss monster Garunix, which effectively replaces the old one. It has the same makeup and stats as the old bird, but it's way easier to summon. This Garunix can be special summoned from the hand or grave anytime one of your monsters whose attribute was originally fire is destroyed in any way. When it's summoned, it can destroy a fire, beast, beast warrior, or winged beast monster except itself, or another copy of itself from your hand, field, or most importantly, your deck. This card at first glance doesn't seem as insane as the old Garunix because it doesn't have field nuking. However, it's far more practical and easier to use, and destroying Fire King monsters in your deck really gets the ball rolling. It creates advantage and can set up instant disruption with the next card we're going to talk about. The new high Avatar Kieran is everything the deck always wanted. It's a much needed extender, as during the main phase, it can special summon itself from the hand by destroying any other fire monster on your field or in your hand, as well as it's a potential disruption, as when Kieran is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, it can summon any Fire King monster not named itself from your grave or in the hand and then pop a card on the field, which is non-targeting. This card is absolutely insane, and it should be noted that that effect that special summons it works during either player's turn, so expect to use this effect even when it's your opponent's turn 0. The summoning condition also will trigger the new Garunix, who can pop another copy of Kieran from the deck on summon, who in turn will reborn another Fire King monster from your graveyard, and then you can disrupt your opponent with the pop effect. Again, this can all be done during your opponent's turn 0 if you have the right setup. The new little chicken Ponix is an awesome starter who can special summon itself, recycles itself, searches all the spells and themes in the archetype, so yay for consistency boosters, and is also conveniently a level 1 fire monster, which kinda seems like what competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And our new major storyline is all about right now. Ponix was already a solid monster with just the effects, but making it level 1 made the card twice as good, as it obviously means that Sinful Spoils is going to be a fantastic engine and potentially a staple in this archetype, just like Rescue Ace. Sacred Immolation is another nice support card. It's not quite as important as the others, but still offers a lot of utility. It's a quick play spell that targets equal cards on your opponent's field as well as Fire King monsters on yours and destroys them simultaneously. Since this is Fire Kings, you don't care if your guys die, they're all just going to trigger. What you want out of this card is just another layer of disruption to stop your opponent. This card is also really good at outing annoying back row, so it means that you have an in-engine and searchable way to deal with floodgates. Sanctuary is another consistency booster for the theme, as once activated, it places Fire King Island from the deck into the field spell zone, so no ashing this. This card also gives Fire King Island protection from card destruction and lets you Xyz summon into a fire monster during the opponent's turn if they special summon a monster. That effective sanctuary makes sense once you take a gander at the biggest version of Garunix, its new Xyz form. The Xyz Garunix has the old Dark Hole effect that the old Garunix had, except once again, it's just better and more practical to use because you aren't forced to use it during the standby phase, and rather, if you use it in conjunction with Sanctuary, you can wait for your opponent to commit to the field, then quick Xyz into it and nuke their board. It also reborns Fire King monsters up to the number of materials that it had when it was destroyed, which can further punish the opponent if they dare to destroy it. The new Fire King deck can be played with or without the Sinful Spoil engine, but I personally think the Sinful Spoils cards make it a little more consistent and a lot less normal summon reliant. Being able to always get the Ponix feels great, as that can get you the Sanctuary, which in turn gets you the Fire King Island, which can pop Ponix to search any Fire King monster, while Ponix is just going to add itself back to the hand during the next standby phase. If you search the new Garunix, it can special summon itself because it doesn't have to be in the hand at the time of the previous destruction, then destroy Kieran from the deck, potentially reborn a monster, and pop a card on your opponent's side of the field. Depending on your hand and your current situation, you can go into monsters like SP Little Knights, or even have a Cyberus line that leads you into Heat Soul for draw 2. On the other hand, sometimes you might just want to end with a couple of level 8 monsters on the field so that you can quick Xyz during your opponent's turn and just blow it up. What I really like about these Fire King openings is that they're pretty insulated from almost all commonly played hand traps like Ash Blossom, Effect Failure, Drone the Lockbird, and Nibiru by using High King Avatar Arvada as your normal summon. Arvada can negate any monster effect your opponent throws at you by destroying another fire monster, which you already want to do because you're playing Fire Kings. Arvada is searchable by Fire Formation Tenki, which in turn is a perfect fodder card to be sent to the graveyard so that you can summon Diabella Star the Dark Witch and get the entire deck rolling. This card was already great in Fire Kings, but now it's just way better because it's pretty much a hand trap stopper on your opening turn that turns into a disruption play to throw at your opponent during their turn. There's also the much more budget-friendly and super interesting option of playing the Dogmatica engine in Fire Kings for this one card in their Servant combo, which, if successful, nets you a free draw, Fire King Ponix in hand, Maximus on field, and a search for Dogmatica Fleur de Lis via Ash Dragon during the end phase, which of course is going to serve as a monster negate when your opponent throws something on the field you don't want to deal with. The Dogmatica engine could have a lot of merit in Fire Kings, not just because of this one card powerhouse combo using the Dear Servant, but also because Fire King's extra deck is pretty free and can be filled with Maximus targets, which actually double as potential Ultimate Slayer targets when you go second. In addition, being locked out of the extra deck isn't nearly as detrimental when you can Xyz and nuke your opponent's board using the Sanctuary. To be honest, new Fire Kings operate much like old Fire Kings, just infinitely better. Where old Fire Kings had to rely on disruption and removal that happened at very specific and situational times, like during the standby phases, new Fire Kings can trigger destruction-based removal cards like Kieran and Immolation at any time they want and whenever it works best for them. Using these and other non-engine disruptions like Ash Blossom, Infinite Impermanence, and SP Little Knight to deplete the opponent's resources and then quickly overwhelm them during their turn is definitely going to be the name of the game with this deck. Now with that said, let's talk about some of the hurdles that you might encounter. Fire Kings have always been a super graveyard reliant deck, which of course comes with its own set of challenges. So monsters like Abyss Dweller and Dimension Shifter are pretty much going to be public enemy number 1 for the deck. Without use of the graveyard, this deck just evolves into big beatstick deck that really isn't good in any capacity. With that said, that's also why it's so important that Fire Kings were given access to a card like Immolation, which can help them to survive a turn while under Abyss Dweller or Dimension Shifter. As I mentioned earlier, this card can also simultaneously deal with back row floodgates that are commonly played in the metagame, cards like Summon Limit, which Pearly plays, or Rivalry of Warlords, which a lot of the mono type decks will also play as well. The matchup spread is fairly positive in my opinion, as Destruction is really good against decks like Rescue Ace, Purely, Infernoble, Manadium, Vanquish Soul, and others, and Fire Kings has this in spades. However, there are 2 decks that completely laugh at Destruction in Unchained and Tearlament. These are 2 very bad matchups for Fire Kings, especially Tearlament, because that deck can and will make Abyss Dweller against you, and the Shufflers can be incredibly disruptive. The Unchained matchup may be winnable if you drag it out long enough, because Fire King has a very solid grind game as it's not extra deck reliant, and the new Garunix getting summoned off a monster being destroyed can often just start the entire deck up again. Personally, I really like what Konami did here with Fire Kings. They didn't take it in a new direction or make it revolve around some super powerful extra deck monster that's impossible to summon. They just went with practicality and they updated the cards to make them a lot easier to use. For now, I think that Fire Kings are probably going to be a high tier 2 deck. However, if/when Tier Lament gets hit, I legitimately think that this could jump to being a tier 1 deck, because at that point, Destruction, which this deck is completely overflowing with, is going to be good against basically the entire metagame, and Destruction is going to be not very effective against Fire Kings at all. But of course, I want to pass the question off to you. What do you think of the new Fire King support? And more importantly, what do you think of the new Fire King structure deck as a whole? Honestly, I was very impressed by both of them. I'll probably have some B-roll footage of the openings in this video because I think Konami did an excellent job from both standpoints. And yeah, I think in the future with all the new Sinful Spoil stuff, that works really well in the archetype. And if tier gets hit, man, Destruction's going to be at a premium, and it's going to be so good to be used against the meta, but it's going to be so ineffective against Fire King unless, well, you have something like Dweller or something like that. So anyways, leave it in the comment section below, and thank you guys for watching as always.